So, a quick intro to Agony. Those who have joined us for the past session have already known this. But for the first timers, you may be wondering, why Agony Expert Series? We have drawn inspiration from an Agony aunt, who by definition is a person who writes a column in a newspaper or magazine in which they reply to readers, who have written to them for advice on their personal problems. In short, it's kind of a play on that concept. Thus, the Agony Expert that we have now, where you, our participants, can share what problems and struggles you are facing within your organization and seek insights directly from our expert. So this is just the 12 of the many. As you can see on the screen, together with the total of 17 world-class experts that we have gathered, they will be covering 8 different topics that are timely and relevant in our industry today. Well, the good news is you can cherry pick what session you'd like to attend. Today's session is on developing and upskilling your leaders. Looking for efficient and proven ways to accelerate and develop 1 to 39,999 employees? We have Manas, Head of Enterprise Business of Emeritus. They provide online business and professional programs committed to teaching the skills of the future by making high-quality education accessible and affordable to individuals, companies, and governments around the world. Our expert will share use cases that transform learning strategies into real business success and more. All right, just a little bit of background of who we are. People is a consulting firm that started in 2004, sold itself and relaunched in 2020 with a consulting model geared towards the future of work. Our team serves both our clients and our network of over 1,000 experts. Who are these experts? We have consultants, business leaders, thought leaders, researchers, and tech partners. Together, we deliver consulting work, speaking engagements, lunch and learns, training, coaching, instructional design, organizational and people diagnostics. Our experts will deliver across 6 broad domains: people, digital innovation, business, sustainability, change management, and design. In short, people can attend to any business challenges you might have. Do check our website and find out more about us at www.people.com. And just a quick run through of what's going to happen today. We have Manas to address the group for approximately 25 minutes, followed by Q&A with you for another 25 minutes. Then we will go and wrap things up for you in the last remaining 5 minutes of the event for us to get feedback of what you think of today's session. Again, we'd love to receive your questions. Drop them in the chat box and we'll address them during the Q&A session. I know you're all excited and I won't keep you any longer. So handling it over to you, Manas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Agatha. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. First of all, before we get started, I would absolutely love to know how to make this conversation more impactful for you. So you go back and take away something which you've come here for. So right away, type it into your chat boxes. The one thing that you would love to get out of this conversation, something that you're here for, something that you want to take away back into your organization, your workplace, your daily lives. What is it in the context of enterprise learning, reskilling, upskilling, or anything in the context of leadership development? So I would give you about a minute's time. Think about it. Type it in the chat boxes before we get started. And we've got a few people who've already sort of told us where they're from. So Dennis from Singapore. Dennis, welcome here. Amanda from Australia. Vanessa coming in from Singapore as well. Do let us know which organizations you're coming from as well as you type in what's important for you. So Amanda is very keen to know how we make online learning truly engaging, not just a process that they take and flick. Very cool, Amanda. Thank you so much for that. Let's give everybody else another 30 seconds. Even if you've got any initial thoughts, any early thoughts, just let us know. Don't They don't have to be super cooked. Very, very early thoughts, good enough. And we'll use them to make this conversation more engaging, more exciting for you. Agatha, let us know as we see more responses coming on the chat as well.
Please drop your answers to the chat box below.
I'm assuming by this time everybody knows how to use Zoom chat. We've been living in this virtual Zoom-ish world for about a year and a half now. So I'm very, very sure that people are comfortable using Zoom chat. So tell us what's important for you. What would you like to get out of this session? What's relevant for you at your workplace, at your jobs right now, in your roles right now? Or feel free. That was our DJ kicking in. We usually have a couple of those through the session. But anybody else, unmute yourself. Tell us what would be useful for you, what would be impactful for you in this conversation, and we'll get going. In the meanwhile, for everybody else, here is an image that some of you might be familiar with. I'm curious, how many of you know when this image was published, or when this image came to light, or anything that you can tell me about this image? We've got one or two people still connecting to their audio. Okay, anyone who can tell me anything about this image, even if you can tell me one thing about this image, I'll be very, very interested to see what you've got here. Again, use the chat, or oh, this is unfamiliar, Amanda. Okay. So well, if this is unfamiliar, let me go back almost a decade. Almost a decade ago was when MOOCs first emerged in the world. So what's a MOOC? A MOOC is a massive online or open learning platform or course, whichever way you put it, right? And in 2012, 2012 was proclaimed as the year of the MOOC itself. The unique thing about that year was that was the first time sort of MOOCs burst onto the platform, burst onto the global scheme of things that we know. And at that point in time, there were at least a dozen players that came into the market and started the whole process of upskilling, reskilling in the online world. This happened obviously a long time ago, before COVID hit us. So this wasn't really a response to COVID, but this was really a response to what was happening around the world at that point in time, and organizations needing a way to move things forward, to move learning forward. And since then, a lot has changed, a lot has evolved, and this is sort of what has happened since then. So 2012, as I said, was when MOOC sort of came into the mainstream media. In October, the New York Times had proclaimed 2012 as the year of the MOOC. That is a big thing. That is a huge thing if you think about the New York Times saying 2012 was the year of the MOOC. 2013, it was a worldwide phenomena. You know, a lot of people sort of jumped onto the MOOC bandwagon. A lot of organizations jumped on the MOOC bandwagon. And then something very interesting happened. And then there was a stream of sort of negative sentiment, or a low point for positive sentiments, as Holon IQ puts it out here in a slightly nicer way, around the MOOC. And they were proclaimed as a failed experiment. Does anybody know what happened there? Why were they sort of proclaimed as a failed experiment? What happened to the MOOCs? There was so much hype around them in 2012, 2013, but just from 2014 onwards, we didn't see any uptake. So what happened out there? Anybody who's been in the learning circles long enough probably has lived this, has seen the story. I don't know how many of you've used some MOOC or some form of MOOC in the past. Be very curious to hear that as well. Vanessa, since you mentioned you're from Singapore, tell us, have you encountered any MOOC platforms in your lifetime at whichever organization you're a part of? What have you experienced yourself? Or Dennis, you shared you are from Singapore as well. So I'm assuming you've seen or heard about MOOCs in some format. I'm curious if you can share light on what have you experienced. If not, then this is what happened. A lot of people came onto a MOOC platform. It was exciting. It was the first 5-10 minutes of learning that happened, and slowly just people got busy. People got busy in their daily lives as we all get busy in our organizations. And from there on, just the MOOCs went downhill. There were the learning completion rates were very, very low for MOOCs, and they continue to be low. Actually, they continue to be about 3 to 4% for most organizations. Some really lucky organizations are able to move this number to about 4 or 5% or 6%, but usually MOOCs don't experience a very high completion rate. And then from there on, something different happened, and then that's kind of where you see a flat line coming on the MOOC life cycle, which is we started to see MOOCs across almost all channels. You started to see them across consumer channels. You started to see them across the enterprise channels. You started to see them across the degree channels as well. And that's kind of where things started to stabilize for the MOOC platforms. And very recently, just a few weeks ago, we had Coursera that IPO'd, and that was the first MOOC IPO, one of the larger edtech IPOs that has happened in the last couple of years. And that got everybody excited about MOOCs as well. If you've been in the MOOC world, there is one fundamental challenge that MOOC hasn't been able to solve for people yet, which is fundamentally, MOOCs presume that people are curious, people are excited, and people are inspired to learn. A lot of MOOCs have not addressed the challenge of actually inspiring people to learn. And that's kind of the biggest challenge that organizations have actually faced over the years, right? And that's kind of where a slightly different model comes in, which is the small private online courses or classroom channel, right? Now, most organizations who've been struggling with the MOOC platforms, with the MOOC channels, their struggle has been that MOOCs continue to deliver completion rates of about 3 to 4%, 5%, or 6%, depending on which organization you go to. But ideally, what you want is you want much higher completion rates. You want completion rates of anywhere in the range of 70 to 80%, or even much higher if you were to truly get an organization to change or evolve. And that's kind of where the SPOC model comes in. Now, if you go back to sometime last year, if you go back to about a year ago when the World Economic Forum published their top 10 skills of 2025, there were a few very interesting trends that came up here. First of all, the skills are right in front of you, so I don't want to read them out to you. But what you would see is the aggregation of these skills. 5 of these are across the domain of problem solving, analytical skills, complex problem solving, critical things and analysis, creativity, originality, and reasoning. So about half of these skills, half of the skills which are critical for us to do our jobs and roles in 2025 are in the problem solving domain. Now, the more interesting part about these skills is these skills are actually not learned or taught in isolation. These skills are taught or learned in an environment where you're working with other people. These skills are a result of our social interactions with other people, of our interaction with our project team members, of our interaction with people who are doing similar types of jobs and are experiencing similar types of challenges. So almost all of these skills are actually not taught in a MOOC environment. The other thing that you would see is the dark blue skills, the technology used, the monitoring, the control, the design, the programming. These skills, on the other hand, actually can be learned in a siloed environment, in a solo environment, right? So there are a few skills that you would see on this list, and we've called out about 7 of the top 10 skills that WEF, mentioned. A majority of these skills can't be taught in a MOOC environment, and some that can be taught in a MOOC environment, right? And that was also one of the reasons why you saw the emergence of SPOCs coming in, or the small private online classrooms coming into the last few years, right? What was interesting about these new skills was this, a vast majority of business leaders, almost 94% of them, expected employees to pick these new skills on the job, which meant that they were absolutely prepared to either invest in employees as employees come on board, or there was a clear expectation that some of these skills are not what employees will come with when they come to the workplace, but these are skills that workplaces will need to be teaching them, will need to be sort of, helping and learning them, right? And the other interesting statistic as you look at that is that almost 50% of all employees today will need reskilling by 2025. Now, if you think about the adoption of technology and how it sort of changes over a period of time, 50% is a very, very high number. And what that means for us is that almost 1 out of 2 out of all of us will need a full reskilling to be able to do a job or a role effectively in 2025, right? And the other part was that, when you looked at these respondents, there was another 40% of these respondents that said that workers, or 40% of these workers would require reskilling of 6 months or less, but that number is higher for those in consumer goods industry and also in the health and healthcare industry. So this is another interesting facet of this, right? Which is when you look at the amount of reskilling needed, this reskilling is not a 5-minute program. It's not a 10-minute program. It's actually a 1 hour reskilling, a 2 hour reskilling, a 3 hour reskilling as a starting point. But ideally, you're looking at much deeper reskilling initiatives, right? And maybe let me pause there a little bit. Let me see if you've got any initial thoughts and comments about the report, because as I read through it, that triggered a lot of personal reaction for me in terms of how organizations would need to learn and evolve over the next few years. So let's take a quick pause here and hear from all of you. If you've got questions or comments at this stage as you look through this, as you look through these skills. If I go back to the skills of 2025. Or feel free to put your questions in chat if that's easier, and we'll take them, or comments in chat if that's easier.
So we have one response from Amanda. I have heard some stats that say reselling isn't being taken up as much as we need it to. What comment do you have about the rate of uptake and change in skills development? And if yes, where is the strongest uptake happening?
Oh man, a wonderful question. So yes, not reselling, it is reskilling. We got that. So you've heard statistics that say reskilling isn't being taken up as much as we need it to. So you are absolutely spot on, Amanda. Actually, reskilling is not happening at the pace at which it is needed. In fact, the most interesting reskilling statistics today in the world are available in the context of technology skills. If you go and read sort of any reports available from a technology skills perspective, that's the most interesting part of statistics you will read. So here are a few interesting aspects from that, right? Number one, when you look at these top 10 skills of 2025, and when you look at the fact that about 50% of the workforce needs to be reskilled by 2025, in the area of technology skills, that number is much higher, first of all. So that number is almost about 67-68% in the context of technology skills, right? Now, what percentage of those people are actually getting reskilled? The world is only able to reskill at this point in time. And when I say the world, I mean the organizations, I mean universities, I mean the entire ecosystem from a learning perspective is barely able to reskill about 30% of that workforce. So in whichever way you look at it, will be falling short of about a 30% workforce that's actually needs reskilling in the technology world, but will not have the right skill sets to produce, to create the right jobs, to do the right work, to do the right sort of things or projects as they are needed by 2025, right? So that's kind of one very interesting statistic, and this is again publicly available data, and you can find it in a lot of different places. Where is the strongest uptake happening now? This is the other interesting part. The strongest uptake is also in technology. So the 30% people who are getting reskilled, in the technology world, or will get reskilled in the next 5 years in the technology world, that's the highest percentage across any specific skill set right now, which means that every other skill set that you're talking about is actually lagging as compared to technology reskilling that's happening in the world today. So while technology is leading the charge, it is still not where it's supposed to be, and everybody else is far behind. So this is sort of what brings us to Emeritus, I would say, at this stage. Now, a few years ago, our founders, Ashwin and Chet, both of them, they came from Ivy League schools, realizing this challenge that we just spoke about, right? They realized the fact that enough high quality upskilling and reskilling is not available in the world. When it's available at prices that are not manageable, not affordable by a large part of the population. And they started with the mission of making high quality education affordable and accessible and bringing it to larger masses out there, right? And that's exactly where Emeritus started. So we started by building partnerships with Ivy League schools, with top tier schools, with top tier business schools, and you will see names like MIT, Columbia, Wharton, Tuck, Cornell, Harvard coming into play. And with all of them, we designed programs, we designed courses that allow participants, that allow our learners to upskill, to reskill, to be able to commit to jobs of future, and to be able to do things that they're unable to do today in their work domains, right? In the last couple of years, we've helped upskill about 250,000 people. So this is the number of people who've enrolled with us. We are one of the largest growing edtech or exec ed players in the world. Just as of last week, actually, we had some new funding coming on board with new investors, with some new vision coming on board. So we recently raised what we call a Series E funding as of last week when we announced this. We had investors like SoftBank coming onto the platform. We had investors like Axel coming on to partner with us. And with all of these partners, Emeritus is valued at about $3.2 billion today, making us one of the largest exec ed players in the world. And this has happened because we see the gap that exists in the world in terms of upskilling and reskilling. And that has led to us partnering with about 50 plus universities today, creating almost 250 courses with them. And these courses, just going back again, they're addressing the Spock model. They're attacking the Spock model further, right? And we do this because we're able to partner with the best universities out there. With this, we're able to create a shift in what completion rates look like. So our completion rates look like upwards of 90% today. With all of this, we are trying to make these courses affordable. We're trying to make this whole model scalable. So we try and bring down the cost of these programs and courses at $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000 per participant. And along with that, we are building outcomes into the experience itself. So as participants finish a program, as participants finish a course or a cohort, they are going from a program to actually going and applying that back into their work, back into their lives rather seamlessly, right? How are participants experiencing us? What does that look like? What type of sort of interventions are they a part of? So they could be a part of short certificate interventions. These are single topics, subject matters, or sort of depth of subject matter being covered in about a 10-week window. When you finish this, you do get a certificate awarded from one of the university partners. These certificates are actually directly given by the university partners. And you're looking at a typical learning effort of about 3 to 4 hours per week per participant. So by the time you finish a course, let's say from Wharton on the business analytics, you have actually committed to about 50 hours of learning with Wharton. The next one is what we call our bootcamp experiences. So bootcamp experiences are much deeper learning interventions. They go on for a period of about 9 to 10 months. And you are looking at a learning effort which is significantly higher in bootcamps. You're looking at learning effort which is about 20 or 15 hours every single week. Melvin, I see a question here. How can I tell if there are skill gaps in your organization? And I will address that shortly. Thank you for that. We have diplomas that go on for about 9-month periods and still requiring a sort of deep learning effort of about 3 to 4 hours per week. And we've got CXO programs where we are targeting CEOs, CLOs, CHROs, CFOs, CTOs, CDOs, whichever CXO you are. And these are very unique experiences because part of these experience sort of happens in a virtual environment. A part of this experience actually happens in the face-to-face environment at the university campus itself. So here I'm just going to show you 2 examples or 3 examples of what these look like, and then I will stop, and then I'll hear from all of you, and I'll also address Melvin's question here. So what does a short certificate program look like for us? So here is a good example of that, right? So in a typical 8 to 10 week program, you've got about 8 to 10 modules coming in. Here is an example of a program from MIT on mastering design thinking, starting from design thinking skills to customer needs, to product specifications, creativity, prototyping, and so on and so forth. During this entire curriculum, you get about 128 video lectures, which have been custom built for this program. You get 3 live teaching sessions from world-class faculty coming in. You've got 3 group projects. You've got assignments coming in. You've got a capstone project coming in. You've also got some real-world application coming in. And with all of this, you are learning from some of the best faculty in the world as far as this topic is concerned. And at the end, you get a certificate coming in from MIT on this, right? So this is a typical example of how a short course would work in our case. When we look at our CXO programs, as I said, these are much longer in duration and journey. They go on for about anywhere between 6 to 9 months at this point in time. And I would rather show you an example of this, which is here. So here is, I thought a lot of you could be from the HR or leadership development or talent industry. And here is a program that we've developed with Wharton, which is called the CHRO program. And what's interesting here is you've got a set of core modules. So you've got a set of core modules around elevating the CHRO role, the human capital talent strategy, and the leading culture and organization change. So you've got these 3 core modules, but then you've got some really amazing future-proofing or future-proof modules, which are your elective modules, right? So these are modules around diversity, inclusion, modules around your talent strategy and hiring your A+ talent, module around future of work, module around career strategies for CXOs or strategic human resources management. And as you go through all of this, you also eventually end up in an on-campus graduation networking event, leading into a Wharton CHRO experience. So that's how we are creating deeper reskilling platforms, deeper reskilling programs, addressing the larger skill gap that we are seeing in the world. So with that, let me pause here and then I'm going to start to take questions. Melvin, thanks for your question. I will maybe give everybody another 30 seconds and see any initial comments or thoughts you have before I start to address Melvin's question. This is a lot to take, so I'm sure there are lots of interesting pieces out here. So let's give everybody 30 seconds to just absorb it before we ask questions.
Thank you so much, Manas, for the wonderful presentation. So there you go. We're now entering the Q&A part of the session. If anyone have any questions, clarification, comments, now is the perfect time to bring that up, and Manas will address them. Go pop it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask away.
Thanks, Agatha. So Melvin, we'll start with your question. This is actually quite fascinating, and there were so many ways in which we could have addressed this question, but we went out the practical route, right? We said that what would tell you as an organization that there are skill gaps, right? And there are a few things that came to us very quickly, and this is really just coming from our own experience working with our client partners or sort of working with large Fortune 100 organizations, right? Number one is when an organization started to see that their own results, that their own metrics, KPIs, sales growth, profitability, whatever you call it, is actually lagging their competitors in the market. That was a very, very first indicator for organizations that there's something wrong when it comes to the quality of talent you've got in an organization. I'll give you a very simple example. We were working with an organization that primarily creates an amazing product at this point in time. It's a technology product. And they've got a large sales force that just goes out and sells this project, just goes and sells it day in and day out. And as an organization, they started to realize that all of their competitors were growing about 6 to 7 percentage points more than them at a bare minimum, versus this organization. Uh, Now, being a technology organization, you generally have access to a lot of data and statistics and analytics and everything, right? And they started to see and churn all of that data, only to understand that, from a product portfolio perspective, their product actually was as good as anybody in the marketplace. But the reason that they were losing a lot of deals, the reason they weren't winning, the best customers, was because, their salespeople were actually not equipped to articulate the right value proposition, right? And that's kind of where they invested in creating the right value proposition conversations for their salespeople. So that's one example where you start to see that your results are not where the marketplace results need to be, right? I think the second data point we've seen in a lot of organizations is just general attrition, right? So when you look at your talent data and you start to look at where your talent is going, and how they're behaving and how they're operating, that's a great data point for you to tell if you as an organization have got the right talent or not, right? So again, I'll take another example of a consumer goods company. Till very recently, they were one of the best consumer goods companies when it comes to being regarded as a talent factory, doing really, really good work. And over the last sort of 4 years or so, starting 2017, they started to see that a lot of talent from their organization was going out and taking these plum roles sort of everywhere in the world, but not within their own organization. And they were themselves struggling to hire the high quality talent, right? And that was again a very good indicator for them that their management teams, their senior leadership teams, just didn't have the right skills that were needed to manage a high performing organization. And that's kind of where they started to work towards developing those skills for their high performing organization at the senior level, right? So we started to look at business indicators and indicators like these, rather than rely on pure play assessments and other things, because these are broader indicators of your organizational success, Melvin. But thanks for that question.
I agree with what Mana said about equipping your employees with the high skills that need in order to apply it in the overall organization. So we have another question here sent to me directly. Our organization is a largely remote workforce. How do we look after their upskilling?
Great question, Agatha. Our organization is a largely online, digital, virtual workforce. This is the reality that all of us are going to be living in, if not already. So if you're not experiencing this, you will experience this very, very shortly. There are a few things we are seeing in these organizations, right? One, from a learning perspective, they completely miss out or lack the learning culture that's needed, right? So from an organizational perspective, if you think of your own organizations where you are working with a set of people, a set of 15, 20, 30 people around you, you're constantly interacting ideas and engaging and having these conversations which tell you, hey, this is the best in the world. This is what's happening in a competitive space. This is kind of what you need to be doing differently. And all of these spur different learning conversations in an organization. In a virtual world, obviously, we're missing these conversations. We're missing our water cooler conversations. We're missing our sort of social chats and conversations. We're missing conversations that happen at the end of the work day. We are missing conversations that happen in an elevator. And in lack of all of this, organizations need to be even more focused in actually understanding what their employees need when it comes to these learning interventions. So what some of our best clients, I would say, or sort of organizations who are best in class here doing, is this. Number one, they are actually spending significantly higher time individually at this point in time to understand what are the gaps, what are sort of their talent needs, what are the needs in the next 2 to 3 years to 4 years to 5 years out there, and actually then tracking it back to how do they sort of cater to these people, right? So I mean, the short answer is just it'll just need a lot more effort, actually, Amanda. Very simply put. Agatha, sorry. I have the next question from Amanda, and I've got one from Sam as well. Probably take the one from Amanda first here. So interestingly, you've got frontline staff that are happy to do some online learning if it's a part of their KPIs. Your leaders say they don't have time, but probably don't see this as valuable. What's the uptake for senior leaders on online learning? Well, it's Amanda. I mean, you've hit it out there. For senior leadership teams today across the world, they are just struggling for time everywhere. I mean, any organization you go to, whether it's a large technology organization, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's a Salesforce, whether you are a large bank, a Citibank, a Bank of America, a large credit card issuer, Mastercard, Visa, you just don't have time as a senior leader. I mean, that's the reality of the world we live in. Forget senior leaders, even middle line leaders, even managers, they just don't have time today. Do they all know that learning is important? The answer is absolutely yes. They all know learning is important, but they just can't carve out the time, right? And that's kind of where intentional learning comes into play. So when you look at how junior employees are learning today, when you look at how frontline employees are learning today, it's actually very simple. You can put everybody through a mandatory training, put it on your KPI, and everybody would learn. But for senior leaders, for mid-level leaders, you need to be more intentional. You need to craft out the time. You need to link things back to the organizational strategy, and that's kind of how they learn today. So that's what's happening for them. Sam, what are the top skills every employee would need to future-proof their careers? Sam, I'm just going to go back to the slide I was sharing earlier. Let's do that again. So here it is. If you think about the top skills needed for people to future-proof their career, these are the top skills, Sam. So let's unpack them a little bit once again. So these were the top skills, right? These were the top skills as earmarked by the World Economic Forum. This is as good as any research gets today. And again, just coming back here, we saw 5 skills of which all land in the problem-solving arena. So these 5 skills were analytical thinking and innovation, complex problem-solving, critical thinking and analysis, creativity, originality, initiative, and reasoning, problem-solving, and ideation. So these were the 5 skills we've seen every organization, which are just in huge demand and need, right, for you to be successful in future. Now, as we said, right, these are skills you don't learn behind a laptop. These are skills you actually don't learn through an iPhone today. These are skills that you typically would learn in social conversations. These are skills where and if I take a simple example, if I take ideation as a skill set, right? We all have at this point in time, I guess, done some form of design thinking conversation. We've all done some form of innovation conversation, right? If you think about the very basis of ideation, it comes from the fact that you got to be able to understand your customers. You got to be able to listen into your customers. You got to be able to interact with them, understand what they're experiencing, understand what's happening in their worlds, understand their needs, their demands, understand the unmet needs, as some people call it, right? And once you've understood those, that is kind of what will lead to high quality ideation happening within the organization, right? So a lot of these skills, you need to be engaging with people, you need to be interacting with people, you need to be understanding what's happening in the world around you, right? These will not happen behind a black box, right? So those are five skills on the problem solving side. Look at the 2 green skills here. You've got active learning and learning strategies, very interestingly, and you've got resilience, stress tolerance, flexibility. Now, keep in mind that this survey was actually published around October of last year, of 2020, right? This was a time when the world had just entered a dark phase, if I would just call it, right? We had just entered a COVID arena. We didn't know what to expect. None of us were born in a world where our predecessors have ever faced it. Most leaders, who were facing COVID, were actually facing anything of this scale, any disruption of this scale for the very, very first time in their life, right? A lot of the managers who were facing this were facing any such disruption for the first time. 50, 60% people, 70% people who are managers today were not a leader, were not a manager when the global financial crisis happened in 2008, right? So with all of that, needless to say, resilience, stress tolerance, flexibility became very important, right? But go back to the first one, the first green skill here, which is the active learning and learning strategies, right? if you think about active learning itself, right? Almost, and we saw some data that almost 50% of your employees will need to reskill by 2025. I mean, we're already in 2021. We've got about 4 more years, and we need to upskill this workforce. And if the workforce can't learn, if they're not curious, if they're not actively engaging in learning interventions, if they're not excited about their own careers and their jobs, I mean, there is low hope out there, I would say. So that has become almost, or learnability overall has become one of the most important skills, right? Now, the next one, the sort of the brownish color, right? Working with people. You only see one skill here, which is leadership and social influence. You don't see coaching here. You don't see giving people feedback. You don't see any of these types of things coming in here. You don't see, you know, skills like how do I manage matrix teams. You don't see skills like these. You actually see something very specific, which is leadership and social influence, right? Why is that important if you come back and think about it, right? Again, in the new world that we are living in today, and we will continue to live in this world in the next 2 to 3 years for sure, in some way or the other, right? In this world, what would make the biggest difference for you as a leader to be able to take things to the next level is how you influence your workforce. How do you influence your workforce to be flexible, to ideate, to take control, to think about things differently? That's what will make the biggest difference out here. And that's why that social influence is very important. And then we spoke of the two sort of technology skills on how do you use, control, monitor technology, and how do you design and program, right? Those are just some plain hard skills out there, and they continue to be important. So maybe again, I'll just take a pause here and see how that addresses your question, Sam, and then what else do you have in mind?
We actually have another question sent directly to me. How
Sure.
will I know if I need online learning to fix the gap of my teams?
Oh, great one, Agatha. How would you know if you need online learning? Uh, Maybe again a pause here. Like, what is online learning for you? So I don't know, Amanda, if you would share light on that. Like, what do you consider as online learning today? Or anyone, Agatha, if you were to go more and dive more, what does online learning look like to you?
To me, online learning is more of building up your skills.
Okay, Amanda, what would you say to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get unmuted. And I hope you can hear me. For me,
Yeah.
online learning is honestly sitting in front of a computer, having automated stuff downloaded. If you're lucky, you've got a person who might live deliver some of it. But it's pretty much, and this is my struggle with it, it's pretty much sitting there staring at a screen, learning some content, maybe doing an activity, and walking away kind of gone, tick, I've done it.
Very true. Very true. Thank you so much. Well, that is really how a lot of us think about online learning today, Amanda. You're not far from what all of us are experiencing. So look, again, I would rather just almost rephrase that question going forward, which is, as you think about learning, there are parts of your learning experience which can be online. There are parts of your learning experience which can be behind a box, behind a laptop, behind a computer, behind a cell phone. But there are other parts of your learning which have to be social in nature, right? And if you go back and think about your own personal best learning experience, right? And always ask this question to all sort of CLOs and CHROs, and it's a fun one, because it's a light bulb moment for them. When you ask them the question, what has been your personal best learning experience? What's been the most phenomenal, most amazing learning experience that you've been a part of? The question always comes back with three parts to the response, right? Number one, that this was a social learning experience. This is a learning experience where, I went to this great resort, which was an offsite location, or hey, this was a learning experience where I had some of my best peers with me, and after the learning experience, we went and chatted, for the next 3 hours about what we learned, right? This was a learning experience where we did something on this big whiteboard and created this big big activity, right? So every single time the response has been, it was a social learning experience, irrespective, right? Nobody has ever come to me and said, my best learning experience was actually sitting right in front of my computer and clicking one video after the other. Nobody ever. I have not met that person yet. Maybe my kids will grow into that domain and be that person, but not yet. Nobody from my generation does that, right? So that's one. The second part about the learning experience was we had an amazing facilitator. Our facilitator knew the topic. They knew what we we're talking about. They knew what he or she was teaching us. They knew the subject. They were in full command of it, right? And again, nobody has ever said that my best learning experience was actually a robot speaking for 20 minutes. That wasn't the case. It was a facilitator who was engaging, who was interested, who was exciting, and that was it. And the third part was always that actually we learned something new. We learned something which we didn't think about. Hey, this was a great aha moment for us. We have now learned something that we didn't think of, a year ago or 2 years ago. The learning content has to be amazing. Nobody has ever said that I have enjoyed my 37th design thinking workshop exactly the same way as I enjoyed my first design thinking workshop. Hey, I have just learned a 28th model of giving feedback, which is no different from the first 27. Well, they're all the same. Nobody's ever come back and said that, but they've all said, hey, actually today we learned about how we would use data to look at how my employees are doing in the organization and create better life for them, create better purpose for them. And that is what is exciting about learning process, right? And in all of this, there is some hope and some scope for online learning, for digital learning, right? As we said, when it comes to technology skills, when it comes to a basic theory, when it comes to a basic framework, yeah, absolutely. I mean, digital is a great way. It provides flexibility. And that's a core part of our working principle as well, right? At Emeritus, a big part of the learning is done through a digital format, but it's a digital social format. It's not a digital individual format, right? It's a format which allows you to engage post that digital learning process, right? You learn something and then you apply back into a project. You learn something and you apply that into a discussion. You learn something and you talk to 6 other people about it, right? And that's kind of where the digital learning needs to sit, right? So that's what I would say. I am passionate about this subject, and you can see that hopefully. But I do genuinely feel that in the world we live in, this combination of digital and physical learning spaces, right? That is absolutely critical. So thanks for that, Agatha. I don't know who that question came from, but thank you whoever asked that one. So keep your questions coming onto the chat. It's about 3:20, so we've got a few more minutes out there. I'm also happy to just hear from people directly if you want to unmute yourself and just ask the question.
Thank you for that, Manas. If anyone has any more questions, please put them down in the chat box. The previous person who sent the message actually said, thank you for the insightful answer. I have to agree on the part where our generation are mostly not inclined into online learning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Agatha. All right, if we don't have any more questions, we can give our friends a couple minutes back in their lives. All of us appreciate that today, so I'm happy to do that. But look, I'm absolutely available for all of you to ask me questions. If you've got any, ask any other things. Feel free to connect with me offline, online. We'll just love to chat with you, share more insights, share sort of what we are seeing in the world around us. Not always right or wrong, but we'll give you some perspectives. We'll give you some ideas around what and how we're seeing this world going around us. So yeah, that's I think it from my side.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, so I guess this will be the end of our session.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming in. Very nice to have you all here, and look forward to engaging with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Manas. We would love to receive feedback from you, so flash right in front of your screen is a QR code of the feedback form. The link is also sent into the chat box, so head right on and tell us what you feel about today's session and how we can improve our next events. Again, two options for you all. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the direct link in the chat box. So while everyone is doing that,